I alluded to last week, I will be recording the class, recording our conversations as well as what appears on the screen. You will find the links to those recordings for each class here on the Twin page at this link here. It usually takes me till the next day to get everything manipulated so I can upload it so it works for the link. So wait until Wednesday typically for that link. In other housekeeping matters, some of you may notice we have a guest. This is Isaac. He is one of our ACE reference librarians. He is here to help with the various workshops we will be doing today. We have a handful of workshops today, actually the last of which, if all goes well, will be take a field trip down into the deep basement of the library. So Isaac will help us with all of those. Speaking of what we're doing today, we've got a lot to cover. I'm not entirely sure we'll be able to fit it all in, but rest assured what we don't do today, I will leave time next week. Okay, so having said all that, since there's a lot to do, let's get started. I have a record of all but two of you watching the screencasts. I will catch up with the two of you at some point to see if there was an issue or you just didn't quite get there. But we are going to dive right in with just a brief introduction to looking at encyclopedias and ALR. So as you may recall last week, as we say previously on our show, for those of you who watch Homeland, we came up with our terms and we did our Google search. By the way, our issue spotting is in the handouts link on Twin if you want to go back and see my lovely chicken scratch on the blackboard. So that's there, and these are the search terms we came up with. And we went through and took a look at some of these results, some of which were good. We talked a little bit about reliability. Remember Stephen Colbert telling us about wikiality and how you can just dive in and change a wiki page. So you need to be kind of skeptical of what you're looking at with regard to what you find on the web. Okay, so let's move on to looking more. So you might want to start with Google, again, with that skepticism. And we did learn a little bit on these websites. We learned, for instance, there's this ERISA preemption thing we might need to worry about. We're not really quite comfortable with ERISA or preemption, but we ran across that, and that does seem to be an issue that might affect our client. So at this point, having looked at some of these random websites on Google, it might make sense to now look at some more reliable secondary sources to get some background on what the ERISA preemption is and do we have to worry about it. And good places to start can be an encyclopedia. Several of you, in looking at the screencast when you were answering my questions, were a little bit confused when I suggested that you would always want to start an encyclopedia. Always is a term that's very rarely going to apply, especially in legal research. A lot of times encyclopedias are a perfectly good place to start because they give you a basic introduction, but always not really. It could be you're very familiar with an issue, so you don't really want the basic introduction. It could be the encyclopedia doesn't really have anything valuable to say. So again, good place, but don't feel like I have to go to the encyclopedia first thing. And as we go through class, I will try to address your questions that have come up in the screencast. Hopefully we will have time toward the end that I can review what I have thus far to see if there are any that I didn't address, and obviously you'll hopefully chime in and ask whatever questions you may have that we didn't address. Okay, so what we are going to do with the first exercise is I am going to ask you I'm going to divide you up in a second, and then I'm going to ask you to look in various encyclopedia resources to see if you can find something useful for our client. So let's see, everybody's here, so I'm just going to do this randomly. So Tosif, Wendy, Nick, right? Mariella, and Kayla. I'm going to ask you to look in ALR. Once I divide everybody up, then I'm going to go through a really quick review on how to get to these various resources, and then we'll dive in. Okay, so you folks, group 1, you're ALR. Group 2, you're going to be American Jurisprudence, AMJUR. So Caitlin, Ashley, Steve okay? Joe okay? And Jamie. Okay, so you're Group 2. You will be doing, as I said, AMJUR. Group 3, CJS, Corpus Juris Secundum, and I'm not going to ask anybody to remember that one. Okay, so I left off Raven, Kristen, Michelle, Susan, and Jamie. Not Jamie, sorry, Jillian. We did Jamie already. Okay, the J's confused me. So we said you're Group 3, and somehow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, my math was off. Okay, Group 4, so I left off with Jillian, will be Bill, Adam, Joanna, and Barbara, and I will ask you all to look at New York jurisprudence. Okay, so a couple of caveats here. The CJS group, you have to go on Westlaw. CJS doesn't exist on Lexis. Other than that, up to you, Lexis or Westlaw. So what we will do is, once I give my little description, I'll give you some time to find it, and then I'm going to ask one person from each group. I will either pick on you or you can volunteer to come up and drive. If you come up and drive, then all you need to do is hit the laptop, and I ask the questions to the rest of your group members. So there is an advantage to coming up. You don't have to answer any questions. And we will talk a little bit about how you found it and talk a little bit about the resource. And we'll see how all that goes. So as I said, just a quick review here on Westlaw, and then I'll go on Lexis. So there are a couple of ways to find secondary sources and titles generally on Lexis and Westlaw. And it's kind of up to you what makes sense to you. You can, I'm sure you all know, just type in your title. So if you're interested in American law reports or jurisprudence, you can see it comes up on Westlaw. And that's one way to go. Another way to go that, let's get out of that. Another way to go, you'll notice in the Browse menu, you can browse your way through, and that sometimes is a nice way to go just because it gives you a sense of what's out there. There are little tips and tricks in remembering differences. Westlaw and Lexis, not that important if you keep track, but for instance, Westlaw puts ALR, or rather AMJUR in texts and treatises. So you don't see AMJUR surfaced up here. You have to remember it's there. No big deal. Third way, and the way that you all are probably most used to using, which is also perfectly fine, is just doing a search. You can do a search from the basic screen, or you might want to narrow it just a little bit. Throughout today, I'm hopefully going to convince you that you don't want to narrow too much, and I will show you why. Now, I'm going to use a different hypothetical because I want you to use our class, our client. So actually, I'm going to use a rather basic drunk driving. And since I've already narrowed to secondary, I can take a look here, and then I can narrow to my specific either publication type or publication title here on the left with the filters. And you're all probably used to doing that on Westlaw as well as Amazon. So you see ALR up here is a publication type. Down here, AMJUR is a publication name. I wouldn't worry about it. You might find other publication types clicking here, as well as other publication names here. So either way, as a rule, from a strategy standpoint, when you're doing research on a topic, I would say this is the way to go. Either start from the very first screen or narrow just to secondary sources. I wouldn't just start in AMJUR or just start in ALR, because how do you know there's anything good in there? And then you have to go back and forth. And another consideration, and actually I think Steve, you might be interested in this, from a cost-efficient standpoint, if you are in a transactional environment, and Steve mentioned to me he's working somewhere that they have a transactional Westlaw environment, you will get charged an extra search. So if I do my drunk driving search first in ALR, and then I narrow down to AMJUR and do another drunk driving search, I get charged for 2 transactions. If I just go to secondary sources, or even back here in the most basic screen, and then filter through to AMJUR, to ALR, to whatever filter I want to use, cases, statutes, whatever, I only get charged for 1 transaction. So filtering is a very cost-efficient means of doing research on Westlaw when you're in a transactional environment. When you're in an hourly environment, obviously, it's just by the time. Okay, so that's Westlaw. Let's take a quick look at Lexis. Kind of the same strategy applies. So again, you can type in the title here, or you can browse using secondary materials. As I understand it, and again, this is a moving target as we discussed last time, that cost-efficient strategies shift as the vendors change how they charge for things. I believe Lexis doesn't have that transactional hourly dichotomy, so it's less of an advantage. But I still think just from your own time standpoint, better to start broader and then narrow with the filters. So you see here, if we did narrow to secondary, the structure is a little bit different. So AMJUR and ALR comes under federal, which to me is slightly wrong because AMJUR and ALR cover state, refer to state issues, cover state jurisdictions and topics as well. So don't get confused by that. But you'll see treatises up here. So the different types of materials. Now you New York JUR folks, you'll probably either want to just narrow it up top to get to New York JUR, or filter, find it in the filters after you do your search. But the filters pretty much look similar. So you do drunk driving. So again, we see treatise, so jurisprudence, AMJUR, you'd find in jurisprudence as well as New York JUR. Again, Lexis organizes it slightly different, and you can click on more to see what else is available, and you can scroll down and get to the actual sources. And again, remember to click on more to get a list. Okay, so that's kind of the quick and dirty of how you want to get to the various sources you've been assigned to. Before we do that, one of the questions I had, somebody put in the screencast, was just an overview of secondary sources. And I'm not quite sure what you meant, so chime in if you want more detail. But the point of the screencast, and hopefully the point of last class, this class, and next class, is to convince you that secondary sources are a really great place to start. Because I don't know about you, but before I started teaching this issue, I didn't know much about liability or HMOs or certainly ERISA. And these secondary sources, as we've already discovered just from our Google search, are filling us in. And I think we'll encounter a couple today and a couple next week that will fill us in. And we'll be really glad that we took the time to go to secondary sources as opposed to the tendency of new associates, and sometimes not so new associates, is to dive right in and look for a case or dive right in and look for a statute. So hopefully I will convince you if you're not already convinced by the screencast. So that's kind of my overview. If you had something else in mind, chime in, ask now or later or whenever. Okay. So as I said, I've given you your resources. I've shown you how to find them. We're looking for the best section or sections that you can find. I will warn you that not all of these resources have good sections, and that's not me giving you a trick question, because like I said, I don't do trick questions as a rule. That's me being realistic about research. Not every resource is going to have something useful. That's one reason why you wouldn't always want to start an encyclopedia. So as I said, once we hopefully find something or have gone as far as we feel we can go, have someone come up from each group, show me what you've done. Show everybody, not just me. We'll see it up on the screen, what you've done, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the resources and features of each source. So look for that as well. Look for some useful resource that you might think, oh, this could help me later on. And yeah, and I guess the only other thing is let's just sort of get on the same page. We'll go back to our Google search. So what are some of the terms you're going to look under? Doesn't have to be just these, but so you're all going to fingers to keyboard and plug in words. What are some of the words you're going to plug in? Like I said, no trick questions. Some of them are right up there. You don't have to stay with those, but those might be good, right? Okay, HMO, what else? Yeah, they're okay. So some of these, any other terms you think might be useful that we don't have up there? Okay. Okay. Like I said, no trick questions. They're too easy. You want me to make them harder? Just say so now. I thought so. Okay, let's get started. Isaac and I will walk around if you have any questions about how to get there or anything else. And just sort of wave at me when you finish. Yeah, this is our client for the semester. We are working with this client for the semester. No, not drunk driving. Okay, sorry about that. Remember, let me pull up the issue spotting if this is causing confusion. That's why I put it here. So that's under handouts. There's our issue spotting. I can't really get it all on one screen, but you can pull it up on Twin if it's going to help.
Just killing me.
Getting towards something that either they like or beginning to feel like they're just not finding anything useful. Because remember, it goes both ways in these sources. So ALR people, did you find something?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Amter people, did you find something? Something. So, CJS people.
Yeah, the sum of all.
Couple weeks. Be patient, I promise. Okay, so sounds like CJS kind of found some other stuff in New Yorker. We think we found something. Okay, so do we have a volunteer from ALR?
I volunteer.
Please,
I second
come on up.
That's right.
Westlaw license.
You'll kill the game next.
I think we have a little bit of both. I don't know.
Up to you, you're driving.
Westlaw.
Sounds like you have a backseat driver there.
We do. We do.
Okay.
A lot of drunk driving going on. So.
No drunk driving.
All right.
That's a whole other
Backseat
question.
driver. I ride shotgun. I ride
Okay,
shotgun.
so on Westlaw, looking at ALR.
Roll D.
We're looking at ALR, so
Our
what
ALR group is going how?
Secondary
Do you
source.
want a mouse? It's a baby mouse, but it's a mouse.
Yeah, sure.
I'll run GPS.
Here we go.
Not a baby mouse.
All right, secondary sources.
So we went to secondary sources.
Yeah, turn right in 300.
Okay, everybody,
Okay.
give Nick
Turn
your
right.
attention.
Yeah,
I
then
will get out of the
American
way
law
here.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, so we're going to secondary sources and
American law
then.
reports.
We then went over to American Law Reports.
So we
Yes,
went
that's
directly,
correct.
okay, that's perfectly fine
Questions
in the
answered?
circumstance.
Comments?
Okay.
Okay, good.
Then you're gonna input denial /S coverage and HMO
English.
and liability.
/, so that. Go ahead.
Oh, you
Denial.
need space
Denial
between?
/S. Yeah.
No space.
Oh wait, go. It's backspace.
Okay, so denial space /
/S.
no space between the slash and the S. There
Okay.
you go.
Now coverage. Now the squiggly and space squiggly and.
Like that.
Yeah. And then HMO. Space. Another squiggly and.
Space, another squiggly and.
Yeah. And then liability. There you go.
Okay,
There you
so
go. Bring it home.
Our
Bring
new
it
verb for
home.
today, what was our verb last week again?
Boolean.
No, today's
Oh.
Boolean. What was
What
last
about
week?
Boolean?
Last week we had the verb for the day. I think we need a verb for
Westlawed.
the day.
We Booleaned this.
We
Booleaned this
Westlawed?
one.
Westlawed.
No,
Okay.
yeah,
So
it
it
was
was
That's
Well,
right.
Okay.
last class we Westlawed, now we're Boolean.
Okay, so
Here we
we're
go.
Westlawing and bullying. Forget that.
Boolean.
Everyone,
Gone
this is
Boolean.
the magic moment where we press search.
I'm mad nervous. I'm nervous.
Here we go. We're loading, and here we are.
Scroll down a little bit.
Oh, someone else is. Scrolling down a little.
Yeah, 3. That's the winner.
Three.
That's the
Okay.
Big bad
So-
Yeah, do it.
Go ahead.
Do it. Do it.
So did you have?
Did I do it or not?
Do it.
So did you have time to find some useful research resources?
No, we just got excited about finding the article.
Okay, so
Guys,
we
we blacked
found.
out. We blacked out.
Okay, so actually.
This was my first Boolean search, so I was really happy with it.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we went Boolean quite successfully. I agree. Okay, actually, Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very
I'm going
welcome.
to take
All
over
right.
and talk a little bit about
Thank you for your time, everyone.
ALR.
That's what's up, brother.
Well done, well done.
Thank you all.
Okay, so a couple of interesting things here. First, so our group found what constitutes bad faith on the part of the insurer, rendering it liable for statutory penalty imposed for bad faith in failure to pay or delay in paying insured claim. Particular grounds for denial of claim, risk, causes, extent of injury. Okay, so question for you. Is this relevant? Okay, our group ALR thinks yes.
We're not biased.
Think about our facts. Our client never made it to the doctor in the first place, right? So, okay, no, you're fine. So this is part of research, is thinking critically about your facts to think about, does this fit? So yes, it's easy for me to stand up here and ask you targeted questions to make you come up with the right answer. You need to sit and think critically. Okay, failure to pay. Did they fail to pay? Well, kind of, but they never. It was more that they never got there in the first place. And sure, you saw denial of claim, but we never got to that point. I'm going to go back and observed that, oh, look, somebody else chose something. Not somebody else being yours truly. Did anybody else in the group look at this?
Yeah, that was the first one we found. But
Okay.
we tried to find something more recent because this is from '98.
Okay, excellent point. Wanted to try to find something more recent, right? Because the more recent it is going to cover changes in the law. So it was originally published in '98, and since we haven't spoken about ALR, you have no reason to know this, so you were totally right on the mark in thinking about that. However, the way ALR works online, and this is actually where online is a little more confusing than print, is Westlaw and Lexis incorporate new stuff. They tell you when it was originally published, but they incorporate new stuff. So if you were to scroll through here, you would probably, let's see if I can do this quickly. I'm not sure how this will work. Nope. You will find more recent, so here actually, you will find more recent cases than 1998. I'm not finding a good example through my find search here, but they are there. So what you need to know about ALR, one reason why you're taking the class, I hope, is that it gets continually updated on Lexis and Westlaw. It would be a little more obvious in the books because you'd pull out the book that was copyrighted 1998, and then you'd see the pocket part, which would be copyrighted 2016 or 17, and it would be right there in front of you. So it's actually a little more confusing online. But actually, absolutely a good point. Another point to think about, hopefully I'll stay vertical here. Another point to think about too is that, yes, it's old. It doesn't mean that it's useless. It means that you have to update it from whenever the last time it was updated, and we really don't have that a clear sense. But it doesn't mean it's useless. If it's on point, you might want to take a look at it. Again, it might be less valuable because it's old, but it's not useless. So taking a look again, making sure it's relevant. Liability of third-party healthcare payor. That's a mouthful, but if you think about it, the insurance company is a third party, right? You've got the doctor, you've got the patient, you've got the insurance company. For failure to authorize required treatment, that's right on point. That's easy, right? That's right on point. And what you'll see is I've highlighted a little bit. Good to take a look, and I didn't give you an opportunity on the last one, but take a look at the introduction. The nice thing about ALR is it tells you what it's doing. So, ordinarily, patient alleging injury due to negligent health care brings negligent suit against the medical practitioner. However, with emerging managed health care, third-party payor is part of its utilization review. Remember, we ran into that phrase last time, one of the websites we were looking at. So that might be a good one to remember as relevant. And cost-saving strategies. So again, the incentives for the insurance company, refuse to authorize particular treatment, and where patient alleges that this decision caused harm. This is our client, right? So this is a good one to look at, even if it was only updated in 1998, because it's pretty relevant. So some of the features. What I tell folks about ALR is see if you can find one that's on point. Like this one seems pretty much on point. If you do, great, mine it for everything it's worth. If you don't find one on point fairly easily, don't think you have to find something in ALR because it's so fantastic. It is so fantastic, but if you don't find it something relevant fairly easily, it's not going to be so fantastic. So why it's so fantastic? A couple of reasons. First, it gives you this nice outline so you can zero in if you want, or you can go through the whole thing. So you can see where third parties held negligent, so held liable or not held liable. So you can start to get a sense of what are the different facts, what are the different applications of the law, and how you might argue for your client to hold the insurance company liable. The other, you've got this nice index. The other great thing about ALR is, if I can find it, you've got this table of cases, laws, and rules. Now, in this particular example, it's mostly federal because ultimately it's going to talk about ERISA, and ERISA is a federal statute. But there are a couple of references to state cases here. And a lot of ALRs, when you have more of a state issue, like, for instance, drunk driving, you'll find a lot of state statutes, a lot of state cases. So ALR brings you right into your jurisdiction. So the other aspect, we'll look at ALR. So if we hadn't already run into ERISA, we would read this ALR, oh, that third-party payer, not so sure what that is, but oh, look, liable for failure to authorize required treatment, and as you're reading the scope, it would tell us straight out, underlining state negligence claim was preempted by federal law, particularly sections of the Employee Retirement Income ERISA. So it talks about managed care, so we're learning some of our terminology. One of you in the screencast asked, how do I find what to search for? What terms to use in an index search? Actually, it was a specific question. One way is to learn terms as you do research and find more and more relevant resources, is to see what terminology they're using that seems particularly relevant. And then finally, of course, one of the reasons in your screencast mentioned that you look at secondary sources is not only to get a better understanding, which is a huge reason, but also to get references to those all-important primary sources, which, Raven, I promise we will look at in a few weeks. And so here's good old footnote 7 talking about preemption clause, ERISA supersedes all state laws. So we're worried about this preemption and ERISA thing, and here's the citation, 29 USCA 1144, subsection A. So right to the USCA, our secondary source gives us what's going to be the important section, at least for ERISA preemption. So hopefully I am convincing you, or you are getting convinced one way or the other, that secondary sources can be worthwhile. Okay, next group, Andrew. We have a volunteer. Oh, it looks like Alexis or Westlaw?
Westlaw.
Westlaw, okie dokie.
So I started by filtering down this list.
Okay, so secondary
Oh,
source.
next.
Okay.
And then text and treatises, answers at the top. So we went about it like two ways from here. At first I was trying to filter through this list. Insurance seemed pretty on point, and also health, but ended up pretty much getting the same results as just also entering search terms from here.
So you guys also went Boolean. Wow, Boolean.
Yeah. I don't know what
You went milder.
What are you saying we on X?
Milder. Boolean. Okay. Well, we'll be going into thorough extreme Boolean next week. So for those
We
of
don't
you
always
who
use Boolean, but when we do, we fall out of
that's mine. You kidding? Actually, I think it might be Steve's. It's Steve's.
What?
Extreme Boolean, right?
That's like a website. Extreme Boolean. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was just saying we should trademark it. That's all yours. I got to give you.
So.
Back to Amder.
Yeah, we didn't come across anything fantastic, but it does have the word.
So, you know what? That is an excellent point. As I mentioned in last class, no, perfect, totally perfect. As I mentioned in last class, you need to question, as we were saying earlier, is it relevant? It's just having the words. You go to a partner or a supervisor and say, oh, here's a section, it has the words. You're not going to do very well for yourself.
I'm
That's how you
demonstrating
know
what
you
not
want.
to do.
Yeah, there you go. No, you had the point. So basically, to my point of not always starting encyclopedias, it's certainly worth a look, but Amder is an example in this issue where it just doesn't have anything really all that useful. Encyclopedia is a good place, again, good place to start, good place to get an introduction. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Well done, Joe. So one feature of Amder Online I'm going to show you is, and I'm just going to actually go back and follow the same path that Joe took. Go to Texts and Treatises, and then go to Amder. Is just to point out to you online that you can actually look in the index, and sometimes that's going to be helpful. If you're putting in search terms and you're just pulling up totally irrelevant sections, it may be more helpful to look at an index. Now, not the case, because honestly, I've done this search a whole lot of times in Amder, and I haven't found anything particularly useful, at least doing keyword searches, but just so you know it's there. A couple of you mentioned last class and in the screencast interested in, okay, how do we use secondary sources in print when we don't have Lexis or Westlaw available if we're working for a nonprofit or pro bono or whatever the reason? Something like Amder, ALR, you're going to have to come visit us and use the good old-fashioned, well, you can come visit us for sure. You can either use the good old-fashioned print and go through the print indexes, or and I mentioned, I think in last class, some libraries, and happily we're one of them, we actually have a workstation that is open to anybody who's welcome to use the library. So right now you all have Lexis and Westlaw passwords. When you graduate, you'll be able to use them for a little while, and we'll talk about that later at another class. But eventually they will go away, and if you don't have access through your job, you can come and use what we call our WestPack, public access workstation, and you can access Westlaw. It looks just like that. The content's a little bit different, not very. So that would be another way how you would do research if you don't have online access through your job. You could come to the library, and Hofstra's not the only law library that has this. Other law libraries do. So if you wind up somewhere other than Long Island, hopefully you'll have access to a law library. By the way, I forgot to ask last time, who plans on staying in New York? Who plans on going elsewhere? Anybody? Okay. Let me guess. California? Do that. And?
DC.
Pardon me?
DC.
DC and?
New Jersey, Massachusetts.
New Jersey, Massachusetts. Okay. A lot of my state examples will be New York for obvious reasons, but I will try to touch upon California and DC and New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts. So, for instance, we talked about encyclopedias being a great place. Well, actually, we'll hold that thought for a moment. Okay, any questions on Amder? CJS? Michelle's going to brave it. Lexis or Westlaw? It's got to be Westlaw. Silly question. CJS has an index, if you were interested. Going plain language. Easy way to go. Old school. Old school? Actually, truth be told, Boolean's the old school, but anyway.
Just kidding.
The newer old school?
It is original school, but the old school.
We'll do oxymorons in addition to the word, the verb for the
I
day.
definitely wasn't wrong.
So is this the section you like? Unjust or unreasonable delay or refusal generally? This is the section. Yeah. And scroll back up to the top if you would. Yeah, because we want to see, so damages for refusal of and delay in payment. And this is in insurance action on policies generally. So did this talk about HMO and denial of coverage?
That was what led us to a case that, yeah, like the last paragraph, not up, like the last paragraph right before the cases. It talks about liability and then it footnotes to a case that's against an HMO.
For denial of coverage, or?
It was a delay case, but I didn't read any further because
Yeah, I can't. Fair enough. Okay. So
but I would imagine, like, I would go to that and I would read that then and find other information.
So how would you rate this compared to what we saw in ALR?
If you're strictly speaking of the content of CJS, I would probably rate it lower, but in terms of guiding us in a direction that we want to be going, I would say it's fairly strong.
Okay. And as compared to Amger?
Maybe better.
Okay. No offense or anything. Okay, so CGS, a little bit better. Actually, before we go to New York Juror, I want to go back to Amger for a moment, but on Lexis, just to show something else, to show Lexis, so we don't give undue influence to Westlaw. And I'm just going to make sure. So I am not going Boolean or certainly extreme Boolean because I don't want to type that much. So again, I'm going to go to jurisprudence. And any number of ways I could have gotten to Amger. This is the way I decided to go. However you get there is okay too. So for some kinds of resources, like Amger, like CJS, and will be like New York Juror, as we see in a moment, don't worry, I won't steal your thunder. Because it's organized by subject, remember one of our themes of the course of bibliographic awareness is how a resource is organized, and not ALR. Encyclopedias are organized by particular topics, actually. Joe was looking through the table of contents of topics, which is a good thing to look at. I don't know that I'd look at it quite in the beginning necessarily, but actually I'm taking your suggestion and looking at it just a little bit later on in our process, after I've done a search, to see, is there anything useful? So again, this talks about physicians and surgeons, so we know that's not who we're talking about. So this isn't especially relevant, but it is talking about liability of third parties for physicians' negligence. So what I might want to do is take a look at the table of contents, which already popped out, to see if there's anything else that's useful maybe around it that for whatever reason my search terms didn't pull up. And again, that's more likely because it is organized by subject. So what's around it's going to be on the same subject. ALR, you go to the next ALR in the book or in the series, it could be on something, it could be on criminal law, or it could be on constitutional law, or something totally different. So table of contents in ALR is useless. It actually doesn't even exist. Sometimes it's useful to get it to view the table of contents in a broader scope. So I can see the content. So actually up here, duty of care, liability for malpractice. That is kind of relevant. I might want to take a look at some of these to see if there is anything. Now, I'm not sure. I actually don't think there is anything particularly useful. But the table of contents will help you discover things that you don't necessarily pull up with your keyword search because you didn't have the magic keyword, but you'll still be able to find. Okay, New York juror. Lexis or Westlaw?
Westlaw.
Westlaw it is. We have a Westlaw group, so it's good I'm focusing on Lexis here again.
Sources.
Again, that table of contents, again.
We didn't use that though.
Fair enough. And it's going to be hard to hunt and peck in a whole table of contents to figure it out. I mean, sometimes you can if it's very obvious. But I think the better strategy is to do a search, whatever search you choose, and then use the table of contents when you find a section that seems sort of or on point or even just sort of on point.
And then the 3 terms.
So you're going sort of Boolean. Not sort of, like Boolean.
And we didn't choose the highlighted one either.
Okay. Do you remember the number?
14.
There
Oh,
it is.
there it is. We chose this one. And it's recent. Number 216.
Good, you're looking at the date. So, disclaimer of liability. Non-coverage general insurer has knowledge of certain rendering policy voidable at its election and fails.
Maybe that's not the ideal paragraph.
Anyways, okay, so disclaimer pursuant to insurance law requires insurers to give written notice as soon as it is reasonably put to disclaim of liability or denial of coverage.
So we saw that disclaimer of liability is kind of also used along with the coverage.
What is disclaimer of liability?
My peers got in.
Peers, yes, you're right. You're right. I promise not to pick on the person up front. Peers.
I think this is like the best that we could come up with. Just, I'm not 100% sure, just in terms of the disclaimer. I'm not sure if that's on point with our issue, but what came up with it.
Okay. I'll give it to you. Okay, so take a look. So granted, I didn't give you a great deal of time to read through, and as I imagine you probably figured out by now, the highlighted one is the one I was looking at. So help maintenance organization, that at least is pretty clearly on point for us. And the point with secondary sources, as well, any of the resources, primary also, is not to find any phrase or paragraph that might fit in. The point, especially with secondary sources, is to find what is helping you understand your issue. So maybe disclaimer is relevant. I don't know what disclaimer, I mean, I kind of know what disclaimer of liability is just by what the word means, but I'm sort of guessing it's not going to be relevant based on what I know what the word means. But here we have health maintenance organization. So here it talks about the section I've highlighted, maybe each member may be liable, accountable for any negligent or wrongful actions committed by him or her under direct and control while professional services. Okay, so that may not be obviously relevant. So it talks about vicarious liability for physician employees. And again, it starts to talk about that preemption. So what New York does, it gives us some grounding. I mean, this is not hugely useful because it doesn't really talk about denial of coverage so much, but it does talk about HMOs, and it does talk about holding HMOs liable. And what it also does, and what's so great about New York JUR and state encyclopedias, and by the way, California has a JUR, California JUR. I don't think New Jersey does, and DC I know doesn't. Is it's going to give us references to the New York law. So there might be something that's related here, it might not. But this about is as close as you are going to get. Okay, so that's encyclopedias. Again, you don't always have to start there. Some will be more useful than others. ALR, New York JUR. I'll debate you on CJS, and AmJUR we decided, nah, never mind. What I want to, so a few people, as I mentioned, expressed some interest in using the print, and we took a quick look at the index, at least the availability of the index online. If you were to come to the library and use the print, you would find, at least for CJS, you'd find the AmJUR index too, but you would find for CJS index here, and I'm just going to pass this around, and the first person who notices what they should be careful of on this, just shout it out. So take a look at it. And if you don't see it, like in 5 seconds, pass it along. This is not a trick question, it is an easy one. You're supposed to look at it and see what you should be bibliographically aware of. Don't do that.
Should we be aware of the year?
Yes, the year. So pass it along. What you're going to see is 2014. I did a horrible thing, and I took the last updated sticker off, so it wouldn't be quite so useful. Most of our books that we don't update anymore, we put bright yellow last updated stickers. Actually, here's what you would have seen. Still have it, so I can put it back on.
There we go.
Great, thank you. So again, just when you're less of an issue if you're looking online, because the index will be updated. But obviously, if you do come and use the print, even the index, you want to be aware of that. Okay. Any questions on encyclopedias, ALR? Okay. Let's then move on to, so we are at one end of the spectrum with encyclopedias. Encyclopedias tend to be more general. They cover a whole bunch of different topics, and they tend to be, they tend to give you less detail and less in-depth explanation. If we go to the other end of the spectrum, you have treatises, and a couple of people are a little bit confused on the screencast questions with this. Treatises give you a lot of depth. Now, not every treatise is going to give you as much depth as you want, but treatises, I mean, a lot of students ask me, how do I know it's a treatise? And my best explanation I can come up with so far is a treatise is a book, or really a title, if we're talking about online, a title on a particular topic by an expert. And the on a particular topic is probably the key, right? An encyclopedia isn't on a particular topic. ALR isn't on a particular topic. We'll talk about law reviews next week. Most law reviews, there's some specialized law reviews like labor law, and ACTAC are more on a topic, but general law reviews are not on a particular topic. So that's part of it, and by an expert, and it goes in depth. So let's take a look. We'll take a look at, and so that's treatises. We'll also take a look at current developments, and that's what I will start the next segment on. So current developments. That's a librarianese term. I warned you there's a little bit of librarianese, and it's basically how we refer to sources these days online, but it used to be old-fashioned print, to let you know what's going on in a particular area currently. So what are the recent cases that have been decided on healthcare law? What are any state statutes that might have been issued? What are some of the perhaps new cases that have been filed? This is something, current development sources are good to look at sometimes in the beginning of your research because you get a sense of what issues you should be looking out for. You'll also want to come back to them at the end because you'll want to update your research and make sure you understand what new cases, statutes, etc. are out there. So one place, where do you find current developments generally? What kind of source? The news, yeah. I told you, no trick questions. You'll get the hang of it eventually. So there's the news. And these days, you read the news online. You might go to a particular news source if you have a favorite one. Or there's good old Google. I would say for general news sources, and we'll talk about legal news in just a second, but for general news sources, they tend to be a good place in the beginning of the research process if your issue is of current interest. So probably liabilities and liabilities HMO and ERISA preemption, that hasn't been in the news at least as far as I could tell lately. So I don't think I'd start in a general news source for that issue. But what I might start is, and let's see if what has been in the news is the emoluments clause. You've probably heard somewhere or other, and I don't know about you all, but I didn't even know there was something called an emoluments clause in the Constitution, and I took con law just like you all did. So now that it's in the news, I can do a search and look for at some news sources, not only to see what's going on with why it is a current issue, but actually news sources. Here's the Washington Post. Here you go. What is the emoluments clause? Does it apply to president? So it's going to give me some basic information on what this is, since I don't really know about it. Another example I used to use, a little more legal specialized, was capital gains tax. There was a while, a couple of years ago, where that was in the news. It's possible that might come back in the news as new tax provisions are considered. So I might go to news sources for that. But as always, when I'm going online or looking at any source, I'm going to think about reliability. So the Washington Post, I think we've all heard about, it's a pretty well-respected newspaper. Here's something called the constitutioncenter.org. Sounds pretty official, but I have no idea. So I'm going to look at that more skeptically because, again, anybody can put up a website. I'm still thinking about my Lisa's Bar and Grillin' website. So I could put up the Constitution and play around with the words if I felt like it. Here's one, the Heritage Organization. Now, you may or may not know this. I happen to know that Heritage Organization tends to have more conservative viewpoints. Doesn't mean it's not worth looking at, just as lower down we'll see there's a more Brookings Institution tends to have more liberal viewpoint. Both are perfectly valid to look at, but understand where they're coming from. And if you don't already know that, then when looking at it, just get a sense of what kind of topics they're discussing. Do they do they discuss topics that are more of interest to people of one political viewpoint versus another, and then just understand what your reading is going to present that viewpoint, because that's why these institutions exist, to further their viewpoint. So again, general newspapers, good for topics that are of interest at the particular time, but not for too many topics that you might be doing legal research for. More specific and probably useful are going to be legal news sources. And here's an example where you need to go to Lexis. Whatever you need to go to Lexis. And the reason for that is that the leading legal news sources are on Lexis only. The leading legal news sources are frequently published by a company called ALM, American Lawyer Media, or that's close enough. And they have an exclusive arrangement with Lexis. About 5, give or take, years ago, they had an exclusive arrangement with Westlaw. Like getting a better deal and switching back and forth like my crazy brother I told you about last week. Anyway, for now they're on Lexis. So if you want to do a legal news search, you should really go on Lexis. So let's take a look at, and now I'm going to get more specific since it's legal news. It probably is more likely, not definitely, going to talk more about more legal-oriented issues. And this ERISA preemption is certainly a pretty legal-oriented issue. I'm going to go down here to legal news and highlight for you a couple of sources that might be of interest. So here under sources, I'm going to click on more and note the New York Law Journal. For those of you staying in New York, you will be reading the New York Law Journal on a regular basis. Just need to, as a New York lawyer, to know what's going on in your particular area. You can get it online and get alerts and all that good stuff. New Jersey Law Journal, another one. National Law Journal, obviously covers nationwide. These are all ALM publications, so only on Lexis. And to give you an idea of what a New York Law Journal looks like. So here's what HMO liability, ERISA preemption. How good is that? What do I want to be aware of? Good day. We need to update, update, and update. I don't bang the table often, but this one's so important I do. So, unlike what I said about the ALR, if it's a news source, this one's kind of old. I might look at it to see if I learned something, but I'm not going to start there and waste my time unless I'm just not finding anything else. So, 99, not much better. Supreme Court, it might be interesting to see if they had. Oh, but here, if I was a little bit patient and scroll down just a little bit, ERISA preemption rejected insurers claim against healthcare providers. 2012. That one I might look at. Even though it's reporting about a different case altogether, I can learn something about ERISA preemption, hopefully with some discussion of New York, because it's the New York Law Journal. So legal news can be a great source to, again, get some background, see what's going on more recently, but also get some background on how all this works. New York Law Journal actually has some great columns on laws in particular areas. I actually follow the column written about condominiums and co-ops because I live in one, and I'm interested in the law having to do with that. So I set up a little Lexis alert for New York Law Journal, and whenever a column comes out, I get this nice condominium and co-op law, and I'm learning about that law through the New York Law Journal. And not just to keep current about the recent case, because thankfully thus far I don't have to worry about it, but just to know to understand and get background about the law in a particular area. So again, legal news can be really useful. Okay. Another good source, and again, one of you brought this up in the screencast, is you want to be able to use free sources and learn how to utilize Google. And here's yet another way. And to me, this is one of the lesser appreciated areas that really you should try out. And that is to look for research guides. Why reinvent the wheel when someone else has done it for you? So we want to learn more about ERISA. And I am using the word law because we're in Google and I want it to be about the law. So I'm going to search ERISA law research. And we'll take a look at some of these other sources in a moment, but let's scroll down. And how do I tell what is a research guide? Well, it says research. Or in the web address, I'll see something like library guide or libguide, something that suggests. So guides, georgetown.edu, employee benefits research guide. So let's take a look at a couple of these in the hopes of convincing you that these are worth your time. So here's the John Marshall Law School. And we open up this particular tab is secondary sources. And so here's one way of finding the treatises we were just talking about. A couple of you asked about good ways of finding treatises. I would say research guides, one of my top ways of finding good treatises. But it's not just treatises. There are other secondary sources listed. I could go to journals and periodicals. They're online resources if I want to see it, get a sense of good websites. Actually, it also gives me some tips on going into Westlaw. And this particular guide also breaks down employee benefits to different types of topics. So healthcare, that's our issue. So again, in the healthcare world, lists of treatises and handbooks. And look, here's a title called Managed Care Litigation. That sounds pretty good. So someone has already done the work for us. And similarly, actually doesn't look that different. Georgetown, same concept. Getting some other interesting hits here. So here's one, dol.gov, and it even tells us Department of Labor, so I don't have to guess what DOL stands for. And again, when you have a government department interested in your particular area, they may have some useful information, if nothing else, how the government interprets the particular law. Now, in reading through this, it gives us really basic information about ERISA, and I might think to myself, you know, I'd really love to see if the Department of Labor says anything else, either about ERISA or about HMOs or denial of coverage. I could use the search. I don't trust the internal search engine. I mean, it might be fine and give it a try, absolutely. But this is one of those advanced Google tricks I promised you last time, and this is like my favorite one. If you remember nothing else, this is really, really useful, not just for legal research, but for like everything. And that is up in the web address up here. I'm going to type in the word site, S-I-T-E, and then I'm going to put a colon. And then right after that is the web address, https://www.dol.gov. Now, I want to get rid of the rest of it because I don't want this to search just this one page. I want it to search the entire Department of Labor site. So I'm just going to get rid of it, so all I search is www.dol.gov. Does everybody get that? Anybody confused? And then I'm going to hit enter and search. And what Google does, and by the way, I'm in Chrome, so that means my search engine is also the website bar here. You can just go, if you're not using Chrome and you're using Firefox or another browser, just go to Google and you can type in SITE and copy and paste whatever our web address you want to use. The results here you can see are all dol.gov. dol.gov. So all I did, actually I forgot the most important part, sorry. I'm so excited, I forgot it. In addition to searching the site, I want to use search terms, right? No wonder why you're looking at me like, what's the big deal? I want to use search terms. So let's choose two of them, HMO denial. And I could have done this up in my search bar. Aha! Now we're getting somewhere. So again, dol.gov, but here it says, so here's a full report. And I can see, at least from the excerpt, it's kind of talking about denial of coverage. I don't know if it's interesting or not. Obviously, I have to go in and read it. But again, use the SITE, whatever your web address is, space, and whatever search terms you want to use. Use that in Google, and you can search any website that way. And again, a lot of websites have their own internal search engine, but when they don't, or it's just not working very well, which I find to be more often the case than you would hope, this is a great Google tool. I haven't killed myself. Okay. Any questions? All right, and last current awareness tool, we will get to treatises, I promise, a little later on, but last current awareness tool is something called BNA. We are going to look at BNA on Bloomberg. BNA is one of those current awareness that lawyers used to get in print back in the print days, and every week they would get this newsletter on whatever topic they were interested in, and it would tell them, just like I described, cases, statutes, whatever. We're going to look at it on Bloomberg because currently our BNA site links aren't working properly. So here's a modern problem. Back in the old days, a piece of paper always really worked as long as you had electricity. Not the case, unfortunately, with websites. So we will use an alternative. Bloomberg Law is now actually, the company is now Bloomberg BNA. Basically, Bloomberg Company bought out BNA Company, and now they are Bloomberg BNA. So you can get it one of two ways. So we'll look at it on Bloomberg Law today. And for the current awareness portion of BNA, they're called the law reports. So here on the home page of Bloomberg, and so here we have the different topics. So you can do a search or keyword search of all law reports, or you can narrow it further. We might try employee benefits. I'm going to go into healthcare law. And here are different titles. The more general is health law reporter. I'm not really interested in fraud. Again, so you just look and see what sounds the most promising. Or you can just do a general keyword search. And the reason I'm going to the health law reporter is to show you what a BNA current report looks like. And hopefully we'll get there. So here's the latest issue, Thursday, January 19, 2017. So if you were practicing in the area of healthcare law, you might want to look at this and see what's going on. And within the health law reporter, we can do a keyword search, so that's more targeted, or again, we can browse. So I might see what have they said about ERISA preemption. And just like news reports and legal news, you can get what's currently going on, as well as some good explanation about the area of the law. And it's scrolling down. Iowa drug pricing, not all that interesting. Aetna must face ERISA class action over benefits reimbursement, maybe. So, no guarantee you'll always find something relevant. Unfortunately, that's not the case. But this is what BNA looks like and can be very useful. We'll be looking at other aspects of BNA in a little while. But right now, I think it's time to do another workshop. So what everybody's doing, I'll pass this. Oh, okay. Pass this around.
Good idea. What you got going on?
Yeah, so hopefully this is straightforward. I'm asking you to look at New York Law Journal and Legal News, either one. I guess the one part that may not be straightforward because we haven't done this yet is I'm asking you to choose your own topic. So if you're writing a paper, that might be a good opportunity to delve in a little bit, or your particular area. So I know a lot of you mentioned you were interested in real estate or IP. But find a particular issue that you're interested in and see what you can find in these various resources. And I give you a hint in a couple of questions. One of the techniques we talked a little bit about last week, and we talk a lot about, is start with your issue. But if you're not finding anything on your specific issue, make it a little broader. Just like we started with ERISA preemption, but sometimes I look under healthcare or employee benefits. That's what I mean by going broader. Any topic you like. Like I said, if you're writing a paper, I'm going to ask you to do this on a number of workshops throughout the semester. So pick a topic if you're writing a paper, or again, where you might want to practice once you graduate. The area of law, rather, not where. The area of law you might want to practice in. And Isaac and I will wander around. Any questions about what I'm asking you to do? I'll dive into treatises. I got just
sent you a test to check your AOL and your literacy.
Slightly ahead of us when I started to talk about treatises earlier, again more in depth. So you looked at the screencast on treatises. For fresh memory, what do you remember on ways to find treatises? You've got two of us examples standing in front of you. One way to find a treatise would be to
Consult
ask your
librarian.
favorite reference librarian.
You don't have to pick a favorite today.
We're all your favorites. We're collective favorites. Okay, so that's one way. Another way, some of you wanted more detail on how to use the library catalog. That is not one of my favorite ways to find treatises because the library catalog can be a little funky. And I think one of you in the screencast mentioned, how do you not get lost in it? And the answer is it's easy to get lost. We'll review it though, again, showing you, sort of reviewing what you saw in the screencast. Other ways? We already saw, yeah. And there you go, online treatises. Again, if they're available to you, as we discussed last week, the online secondary sources, especially the treatises, can be super duper expensive. But if they're in your plan, then by all means, definitely fantastic resources. And one other way we didn't really highlight, my mistake, so I won't ask you to try to guess it. One of the great things about some of the secondary sources we already looked at, ALR, encyclopedias, they will give you references to other great secondary sources, including treatises. Not always, but again, always good to look at those resource references in whatever resource you're looking at. Okay, so quick review online, how to do all this. And let's start with access. So I'm going to start in the very beginning, like they say in the song.
It's a very good place to start.
So I've heard. Okay, same basic strategy applies. We can narrow to secondary materials and then look at treatises. Again, for research purposes, not for class investigating treatises purposes, but when you're doing research, again, I think it's best to not go narrow too far. So this is probably as far as I would go, because I don't know if Lexis is going to call a useful source a treatise, or is it going to come under law reviews and journals, or all this stuff. I don't really care what Lexis calls it. I just want to find a useful source, right? So then the other way to do that, well, actually a couple other ways. I can type in a search terms, which we'll do in a second, or what I can do if I happen to already know of a treatise, I can, like we've been doing with other sources, I can just type in the name. So even if I just guess that there must be a treatise named ERISA somewhere, I type in ERISA, and sure enough, here's Haley's litigation report, which may or may not be called a treatise. Don't worry about, is this a treatise, isn't it a treatise? Again, the goal is to find a useful secondary source to help explain what your issue is. So let's go ahead and do that search. So this is, again, not Boolean. This is just plain, old-fashioned plain language, whatever you want to call it. I can't think of a clever name for it. Well, that's the real name for it. I'm trying to think of a clever name for it.
Not as good as Boolean search.
Why isn't it searching? Is actually a better question at the moment. There we go. Okay, so let's just start over. There we go. And again, I can narrow from here. narrow down to treatises. So again, personal injury, some of us have been talking about, is this malpractice? Possibly. You see HMO, managed care health organization. That sounds kind of useful. Treatises are one of those sources subject to range. A treatise, again, is an entire source about a particular subject. Treatise is one of those sources where you definitely want to look at the table of contents, just to see, I mean, if you find, even if you find a great section or chapter or whatever it's called in the treatise, look at the table of contents. First of all, for those of you who are worrying about costs, as you all should be thinking about, it doesn't cost any extra to look at the table of contents, but more importantly, you might find something useful. Now, just because of how I have Lexis configured, my table of contents is already expanded out. You all probably, if you're following along, might see that, so you just go there. So this particular section I clicked on, action based on palliative care, vicarious liability. Not actually sure vicarious liability applies, but check this out. Table of contents. I look at the next section, action based on denial of treatment. That's right on point. I'm more going to want to look at that much more than the one that my search terms pulled up. So again, table of contents, totally key and useful when you're looking at treatises. So the other thing I want to make sure of when I'm looking at any resource, bibliographic awareness, is to update, and update. Remember, now it's a little tricky on Lexis and Westlaw. And you want to do this especially for treatises. Sometimes treatises are updated regularly. Sometimes they're put online and then they're not updated again. And you don't know just by looking at this, at least I don't. It's a little tricky. You need to go to the full table of contents, go up to the top, and either you'll get the info here, but sometimes you get a blank screen and I don't know why they do that. Or you can go to the publication information, or sometimes it's called copyright. And then I would find out that the copyright date is 2017. So we're confident that that's pretty up to date. Okay, any questions on Lexis? Pretty much same strategy applies on Westlaw. You can throw in your title and see if ERISA comes up. Westlaw answers, so ERISA subrogation, ERISA practice and litigation. That sounds pretty promising. It's sort of like the Google, I feel lucky approach. You can browse, go to secondary sources, and then click on treatises, text and treatises, and you can see a list. And again, you can do a search and narrow it that way. Whoops. And best to do a search without a typo. Now I narrow it to secondary sources, so I don't have to filter for that. And again, Westlaw and Lexis sometimes requires you to click on the more link. And sure enough, here are texts and treatises. And I always do this with Westlaw. So if you see me clicking and waiting, just like speak up and say, click on apply filters. Westlaw doesn't automatically do it. Most, at least the websites I'm used to, do. So I wait, and then realize I still have to click again.
And so which filter did you apply?
I applied the text and treatises filter.
Okay.
Just to narrow it down. And again, I might want to do this after doing my broad search, either in all of the sources or just in secondary sources. I might actually want to narrow to text and treatises if I really want a focused treatment on a particular topic. So looking here, I see Pennsylvania practice. So I see something called American Jurisprudence Proof of Facts, Liability of Health Maintenance Organizations. That looks promising. I might want to take a look. We're going to talk about proof of facts in depth later on in the semester, but here's an example of why it's good to do a broader search and not just narrow to a single title like AmJur or ALR, because you might encounter something you might not be that familiar with it, but it looks useful, and that's the point of all this. But let's scroll down to an actual treatise. Florida jurisprudence. There's another state jurisprudence. If we were in Florida, would be So here's modern tort law, liability of hospital. We're not talking about a hospital. Vicarious liability, still not sure if that's going to apply. Maybe I'll take a look. It's HR series compensation, so we are talking about benefits, healthcare benefits. Again, if this is in my plan, clicking on it isn't going to cost any extra, so I might take a look. The other thing I might take a look, all right, I'm not sure, imputed legal responsibility for acts of another, not too sure, but looking up here again in the topic hierarchy, kind of in the table of contents that's available to me here, I see managed healthcare liability issues. That does sound useful. Liability managed care provider malpractice. That sounds really useful too. So that table of contents once again. So I might want to look at this whole section or these other sections. Liability for negligent management of care. That's interesting. Maybe we have a cause of action as negligence, that whoever made the decision in the insurance company was negligent. And sure enough, look at this, other negligence liability, including denial of claims. Now, there's no guarantee you're always going to find something great like I keep on pointing out to you. Obviously, I looked ahead. The point being, check out the table of contents and look around at what looks possible and see what you find, because you may very well get lucky and find something useful. And again, we want to update. My goal is that you will be totally sick of me saying this by the end of the semester, and I'll see everybody rolling their eyes. That is my goal for the semester, one of my goals for the semester. So in the meanwhile, I'm going to update. So I am going to go back to the title, and there's that I link, and sure enough, January 2017. And if you're not exactly sure where in the breadcrumb trail to click on, just click on back till you get to the title. Okay, so it's Treatises, Lexis, Westlaw. Let's take a look at Bloomberg. So let's go back to the home screen. Oops. It logged me out. And logging back in. So we could look at books and treatises, and essentially the same strategy applies. But on Bloomberg, I also know, and now you will know, that there are a couple of other useful resources. We looked at law reports for current awareness, but there's also something called portfolios. B&A portfolios are a category to themselves. They're booklets, usually they can range from 50-something pages. They're really targeted, in-depth explanations of a very specific topic. So it's kind of like ALR. If you find a portfolio on your topic, it explains so much for you, it's great, but there's obviously not a portfolio on everything. We also have here, so on Bloomberg's not quite as flexible as Lexis and Westlaw. So what I found is the best way. If you find a better way, go for it. If I want to search different types all at once, I don't want to search first treatises and then portfolios. Now on Bloomberg, it's a flat rate. So if you're somewhere that subscribes to Bloomberg, it doesn't matter how many transactions or time or anything, you search as much as you want. So it's not a cost concern, it's more of a time efficient concern. So what I'm going to tell Bloomberg is all legal content. And what Bloomberg provides for me is this list of content type. And if I go to the plus sign under secondary, I can tell Bloomberg, I want to search portfolios. Oh, I wonder what manuals are. Manuals, how to do stuff, that might be useful or not. You can click it or not, and you can see Bloomberg's adding it to my search. And I definitely want books and treatises. And then I can do my search in these, my custom-made search sources. So I'll put in keywords, and Bloomberg, you have to do Boolean. Bloomberg does not have any natural language, and so we will be talking, as I promised, more about Boolean next class. But in the meantime, bear with me. So I'm telling Bloomberg, please search the phrase exactly as it appears, managed care. I want that phrase within the same sentence of any form of the word libel. So libel, liability probably are the most likely variations. And then search. And just to show you what a portfolio looks like, I'm going to narrow, again, filter down to portfolio. And I mean, reading this, the first one, credentialing strategies, is change environment, that doesn't look particularly. This one, I don't know what corporate practice of medicine means. So, truth be told, I probably wouldn't click on this. But as it turns out, it does have some relevant information. Again, you might find it, you might not. One thing you do want to know about, actually, let's go back, because this is worth mentioning. So, if I decide I want to click on this, it says Practice Tool Oklahoma. We're in New York, our client's in New York, not Oklahoma. But if the overall topic sounds interesting, again, hopefully I do sound like a broken record, I'm going to look at the table of contents. I'm going to not look at the Oklahoma part, but I'm going to look at the overall portfolio. Might want to look at the description to see if it is relevant, and then the detailed analysis, and see if there's anything that looks interesting. Corporate and managed care, it mentions managed care, maybe. And it does talk about malpractice liability. Now again, this is a little far-fetched in terms of you figuring out, oh, corporate practice of law, I want that, because it didn't make sense to me either. The point being that if you do see something promising, but there's a subsection that isn't, take a look at it anyway and use that wonderful table of contents. Okay. So somebody asked about in the screencast, and it was on my agenda anyway, to look at Google Books. Google has books online, but you only pull them up if you actually tell Google, I want to search Google Books. And the way you do that, Shop of Shops, is to Google Google Books and then click on Google Books. And you can see Google Books. And then you can do your search just like you would do any search. So health, plan, liability, and notice I'm using different terms throughout my different examples. Managed care, health plan, especially when you're dealing in a area where you don't have to worry about a per search charge like Google, which is free. It's worth trying different terms. So here on Google Books, I've tried this particular term, and employer health plan accountability. That could be promising. Retiree benefit, ERISA health plans, essentials of managed healthcare. Back last class, one of you mentioned I really want to understand how this whole health plan works and how they make their decisions, right? If we're going to talk about negligence, it would be good to know what the standard of care is for treatment decisions. So maybe this would be useful. Now the thing about Google Books is it's pretty random in terms of what you can see when you click. You might be able to see the whole book. You might only be able to see excerpts of the whole book. It has a lot to do with copyright. Basically, you have to take what you get here on Google. So I think one of you asked about, I have difficulty accessing the book. Unfortunately, my only answer for you is to find it in a library if Google isn't letting you see it. So you can try some of the Google navigation, next, previous, but a lot of the times, because of copyright, Google won't let you see the entire thing. Questions about Google Books or finding? So we talked about what treatises are, in-depth titles on a particular subject. Talked about how to find treatises, Lexis, Westlaw, Bloomberg, Google. We will look at the catalog in a moment. So let's talk about how to use treatises. And that's how we will get to the catalog. So here's the library catalog. Any number of ways of getting there. Here at the library homepage, you have a box here, or you can click on more options. You either get an advanced, or here's what the basic, that's what we saw before. I actually like to start in the advanced. Because you get the multi-box, I'm sure you've seen this in other search resources. where you can put in different search terms. And so what I'm going to look for, actually I'm only going to use one box for now, but you can do even on the screen, healthcare law. So I'm going to search the catalog. Now the catalog is not full text, and this again is that bibliographic awareness theme where you want to think about what you're searching. Lexis, Westlaw, Bloomberg, you're looking at treatises, you're looking at full text. When you do a keyword search, you're searching the entire text of that 300-page treatise, multiple 300-page treatises. On catalogs, and we'll look next time on indexes, you're not searching full text. You're searching just basic information about the resources, whether the resources are books we have here at Hofstra or articles that we'll look at next week. So the other thing you want to be aware of is here at Hofstra, which is different at different schools, here at Hofstra we have a catalog for all of the libraries. That means it's not just legal stuff that we're going to find. We're going to find all sorts of non-legal stuff. So if I just search the word healthcare, I'm going to find lots of stuff about health that has nothing to do with law. So here's an example where I would put in the word law. If I'm searching on Lexis and Westlaw, probably not, because it's already pretty much legal stuff there, so I don't need to narrow it. Okay, so there is healthcare law. And the way I use a catalog so as not to get lost is I do my best guess with a keyword search. Maybe I'll use 3 different boxes, maybe I'll use 1 box, whatever you think makes sense. And then I'll try to find a title that seems close. So contemporary issues in healthcare law and ethics. Okay, healthcare law, I'm not so worried about ethics at the moment. A little bit old, not terrible, so might still, this title in itself might be useful. This happens to be an ebook. We'll look at that in a moment. Actually, if you scroll down, we'll actually find it in print as well. But let's look at the ebook, because then I can show you the whole thing. And the reason I want to find a title as close to interest as I can is to use those subject headings. Actually, somebody asked about that in the screencast questions. And the way to use the subject headings is when you find a useful title, take a look. Now, these subject headings are standardized. Everybody who uses a catalog in the United States and a good part of the world uses these same list of subject headings. So this particular title was assigned Medical Care, Law and Legislation, United States, Popular Works. Could be useful. So I'll click on it. And what that does is that brings up other titles that use that same subject heading, Medical Care, Law and Legislation, United States, Popular Works. So here's a whole list of all the different subject headings around the one that I chose. Now I could look and see what other titles use that subject heading. So there are 3 others. Or I could also look and see what other subject headings look promising. So none of these look kind of specific, although handbooks and manuals might be useful. I might go to the previous page to see if there's anything listed. This is just alphabetical list of subject headings. So if there's anything earlier in the alphabet. So here's just a more general one. It's not popular work. It's just medical care, law, and legislation. And I might just scroll through, or I always like to look for how things are sorted. I might sort it by reverse year to see something more recent. Okay, let's dive into our particular title. I'm just going to back up to get, and that's why I chose the ebook, so we can actually look at it. So when we do have an ebook, there's usually a link to it. And here is the basic information, but there's also a link here to the full text. Downloading ebooks technology, in my humble opinion, hasn't matured yet. It's not quite easy to use. So I deal with a lot of people at the reference desk who have terrible trouble getting where they need to go in ebooks, and I empathize completely. So you have to approach, I think, you have to approach ebooks with a lot of patience. This particular one, so if we wanted to download it, it might cause issues, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to look at it on the screen here. So a couple of ways I'm going to use a treatise, whether it's print, whether it's an ebook. We already saw sometimes there's an index available. So we already have some good search terms. So I'm going to go to the index, and I might look under HMO or health maintenance organization. So, sure enough, there is an entry. So I make, looking at the entry in the index, it's telling me, okay, let's take a look. Capitation, don't know what that is, don't think so. Corporate negligence, possibly, because we're thinking about negligence. So I definitely want to go to page 196. Tuition immunity, 197 to 8, so there's a whole section. External review, not sure, maybe 324, these others. Don't think vicarious liability. Okay, so we have 196, maybe 324. I might look under managed care. Also a malpractice law. Sometimes just scrolling or flipping through an index, you get ideas of terminology. So managed care organization. Again, corporate negligence 117. We get another reference to 196. Provider payment policies. Again, that vicarious. Oh, utilization review. We keep on running into that phrase. So 197. Also that same set of pages. So we definitely want to take a look at that. So I can either go straight to that section and see what so here's starting on page 196, malpractice in the context of cost containment and managed care. That sounds useful. I'm going to look at that. The other thing I'm going to look at, once again, I hope I'm beating this to death, is I'm going to look at that table of contents. And I'm going to scroll through and particularly focus on those sections that I already know are useful. So that 196, maybe 324, there was another one in the hundreds. But even the detailed table of contents, this will take me 3 minutes to scroll through if I read through it carefully. I'm not going to make everybody do that, but so legal structure, I can get some background. Here, the long government payment programs. Not interested in Medicare and Medicaid payment. Patient care issues. Ooh, look at this. Starting on page 187, law of tort liability, negligence. Negligence liability on the institution or organization. All this sounds very relevant. So, and again, that's where that 196 came in. Scrolling through, legal and ethical health insurance, financial incentives to provide less care. So that's kind of what we've been talking about in terms of why the insurance company might have denied our client. Controlling utilization of healthcare services. Again, that same concept, legal liability for improper denial of claims. So again, just scrolling through, I didn't get these references from the index. I didn't know just out of the top of my head, oh, I should look on page 313. Scrolling through that detailed table of contents is giving me lots of great references. You know, the good thing about the table of contents, again, to answer one of the questions from the screencast, is it's also, if you don't know what terminology, what term to look at in the index, scroll through the table of contents. You'll get plenty of words and good ideas of terminology that sounds relevant. I might not have thought of utilization review. In fact, I'm sure I wouldn't have thought about before doing research, but now I know it's relevant by scrolling through the table of contents. Okay, one of you, and I had mentioned in the screencast, and I'm just going to look briefly at WorldCat. Now, library catalogs, as I said, are not my favorite place to find treatises because they are pretty complex to use and they throw in a lot of other stuff that aren't useful. Also, at least while you're here at Hofstra, the Hofstra library catalog will tell you what we have, and you're welcome to use it. But if you go to California, the Hofstra catalog, great, it'll tell you Hofstra has a book, but how are you going to get it? Likewise, WorldCat. WorldCat will tell you all these books that exist, but unless we have it here, how are you going to track it down? So good resources to identify whether something exists, and for all of you who work on journals, that's very important, I know, but when you get out of practice and you actually want to get your hands or eyeballs on a treatise, I'm not sure the catalog's the best way to go. But here's WorldCat, and just to show you what it looks like. And I can use the subject headings to get ideas of titles I might want to go try to find somewhere. Law of Healthcare Administration. But this isn't really going to be useful for me if I'm doing research on this subject and I need to look at this. Any questions? I'm probably committing librarian heresy by saying bad things about library catalogs, but there you have it. Okay, all right, another heretic back there. Knew I invited him for a reason. Okay, so for the last part of class, we are going on a field trip down into the library. I am going to distribute the question sheet. I have a hunch we will not finish all of these questions by 7 o'clock. So what we will do is I will leave time at the end of next class to finish. What I'm hoping to finish is question 1, which has 3 parts, which is why we're going into the library. So I'll pass these around now. And again, I'm asking you to pick an issue. So if the issue you just picked for the first workshop works for you, that one is fine. For this one, basically, I'm going to ask you to find a treatise in the library and put fingers to book, because there will be instances where treatises don't exist online, or for those of you who are working in organizations that don't have access to online treatises. And what I want to show you briefly before we go anywhere, I am referring you to Hofstra's research guide for treatises. To get there, you go to the Law Library homepage, you click on Library Guides, and you scroll down to Recommended Treatises. And then you'll see a list of subjects. And yeah, those of you who noticed my pin, I'm a cat person. Okay, so let's head down to the library. Isaac and I will lead the way. We're going into the lower level because that's where most of the treatises are. Isaac and I will help you find the treatises because that's a little tricky. And hopefully we'll at least get through that first question by 7 o'clock. No, workshops aren't graded. Workshops are for you to put your hands on because that's how you learn how to do research. And